Welcome to Consults Over Coffee. I'm Dr. Michael Jones, and my guest today is Brian Harris of Harris Training Systems. Brian has degrees in exercise science, clinical dietetics and nutrition, human movement, and corrective exercise training. He has a wealth of experience, and he's here today to talk to us about getting back in shape and reclaiming your life. I think you're really going to be interested in what Brian has to say. Enjoy this. All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Consults Over Coffee. I'm Dr. Michael Jones. And joining me tonight is my nemesis from our bike racing days, Brian Harris of Harris Training Systems. You and I go way back, having beaten on each other repeatedly for a few years.
Yeah, yes, for sure.
I have a little PTSD.
Right, yeah, exactly. I was chasing you for a long time there, and I kind of caught up when we were back and forth. It seemed like it was
great. It was fun. It made me work harder. It made me better, and it was always very positive. Which is, I think, when you're doing that kind of stuff, you always appreciate that, guys that you can throw down with, and afterwards go get something, go get a cup of coffee or go have a beer.
Yeah, for sure. We had a good time.
So so tell me a little bit about you, just for the folks in the audience, so they understand exactly how qualified you are, and tell me a little bit about Harris Training System.
All right. Yeah. So I worked on my bachelor's out in California and finished that probably about 32 years ago now. And that was in exercise science with a focus in athletic training. That athletic training component is basically prevention and treatment of injuries. So really great component, most important component, I believe, in exercise, because you have to look at prevention. Every athlete, every person does get injured at some point. And so we look at prevention first, try to get the body moving in all the systems correctly and all the planes of movement correctly, and then build a program from there. So then I came back to Chicago area, and a couple of years later went and got my master's degree in clinical nutrition.
Nice.
Because I felt like that was the missing component of being a coach and trainer, was that nutrition component. I mean, it's huge. It's just as important, if not more important, than exercise. I think we're going to get into this a little bit. When you have people that are very sedentary and not doing anything, sitting around, especially during the COVID era here, it's partly about getting up and moving, but a lot of the focus has to be on what you're consuming and what types of foods and how much of it. So that was a big component. The other component of that nutrition aspect I felt that was super important was nutritional supplementation. If you're not getting the correct diet, and here in the Midwest, for example, everyone's deficient in vitamin D. So, you gotta be taking vitamin D. And there's a whole different level of what you can do with that nutrition. So, and then a couple of years later, again, after I finished that degree, that master's, I went and got my master's in human movement with an emphasis on corrective exercise. And basically that kind of leads back to that first bachelor's degree, which was the prevention and treatment of injuries. And corrective exercise is basically what a physical therapist does, but I don't use the ultrasound and EGS machines and that kind of stuff. It's all based on looking at each individual and running them through some tests of flexibility and movement, and deciding how to progress them to a more functional individual. And so that was really great. I ended up teaching a sports nutrition course for the master's at the master's level for a while, and still do that as an adjunct professor occasionally.
Oh, cool.
And that's pretty much what Harris Training Systems is all about. I look at all that, whether it's a sedentary person or an elite athlete, and we kind of do the same thing. That first initial meetup is all about getting baseline diet information or movement information, injury history, family history. And then from there, I build a program based on that individual. Again, whether it's a sedentary person, middle-aged, or whether it's an elite athlete, young, healthy, you got to look at all that stuff. And
I was going to ask you, because and we'll get in more into this in a minute, but as we're sitting here doing this over Zoom, in the COVID thing, have you converted part of your business to online stuff, or how's that worked for you?
So I didn't. I know some individuals that did do that, and especially the group instructors is what I found. So I had a yoga instructor working for me, and her studio got completely shut down, and that's where she saw all her individuals for classes. So she started doing everything on Zoom, and she was able to survive that way. We were locked down here in the Chicago area for a few weeks, and I was very fortunate to have a few clients that still wanted me to come to their house, and we just all wore masks and stayed 6 feet apart as best as we could. And so it worked out. It ended up working out well. People are, now that it's getting warmer here, there's a lot of individuals out trying to get fresh air and trying to move again, and that's great to see.
Yeah, and that's part of what I want to talk to you about, because as I as a veteran of the healthcare system, my biggest piece of advice to people is stay the hell out of the healthcare system. If you need to be there, there are great things that can be done, but the fact is that it's expensive, and very often for a lot of the problems that I would see. Hypertension, diabetes, obesity, cholesterol, mood disorders, blah, blah, blah. It goes on, reflux, all this stuff. Most of this is self-inflicted stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's diet and lifestyle stuff. And so, and I see a lot of it, now again, everybody's been cooped up, as you said. The weather's turning, everybody's coming outside. They got 15 pounds to lose from, eating donuts, watching Breaking Bad reruns, right?
Right. Exactly.
So they gotta go get rid of all of that. So, how do you take, what would you say to someone who, walks in your business and says, hey, get me started here. I got a BMI of 30 or 33, and I really haven't done much for the last year and didn't do much before that. And how do I begin? And
yeah, it's a great question.
It's a broad question.
It's broad, but you know what? It's a lot of individuals out there think just like that. How do I even get started? And you mentioned those diseases earlier. I am a firm believer, and I think that's why my business has been great for as many years as I've been in it, is I'm a firm believer that all that stuff can be prevented through diet and exercise. I don't even doubt it. I've seen it happen. I've seen people that have type 2 diabetes and, get them back to normal blood sugar levels. I've seen people with, heart disease, high blood pressure and other issues. And, you can control that stuff through diet and movement, no doubt.
Let me tell you, and I, to some extent, improved, because before I got back into racing, I was up to like 240 pounds.
Wow. Yeah.
When we were racing, I was like racing at 163.
I was going to say, I think you were lighter than I was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And, and I was what, 6'2.5".
Right.
I mean, yeah, so, and it was all, what, I was working my butt off, doing all the right stuff, but I was eating badly. I'm a stress eater. A lot of people are. I mean, we can talk about
Sure.
that a little bit. So you eat a bunch of, sweets and fatty foods, and you don't do anything, and you live a stressful life. And I
Right.
turn around and, and I'm on blood pressure medicine, cholesterol medicine. My mood is terrible, and I'm thinking, I would just put my head in the oven and get it over with. It'll be cheaper and quicker, because
Right.
I'm going down the wrong path,
Yeah. Oh,
and
sure.
so,
And I think, with the whole COVID thing, the pandemic, I mean, it really has made people look at their lives differently, and sit, like you said, the stress of and anxiety of just sitting around doing nothing is really, had people put on weight and have mental issues. And
yeah,
so I think one of the biggest things, you have to, a person has to make a decision that, whether it's their doctor that tells them that they need to drop some weight, or if they just look in the mirror and say one day, I have to make a change. um, the change isn't going to happen without me making the change. And so that's really the first step. And once you take that first step, it might just be like, I recently worked with a client that's super sedentary and is having a really difficult time mentally through this pandemic, and hasn't left the house practically at all. And 3 weeks ago, finally got out and walked around the block one time. I mean, that's where it starts. You got to be held accountable to yourself. Get out, walk around the block one time, every day for the next 3 or 4 days, and then try to make it 2 times around the block. And then, keep working at it a little bit harder each time, each day. And then diet, it's, it starts with the person again. I say this a lot. I'm going to give you an example. Years ago, I helped direct an obesity clinic for children. And this 13-year-old girl came in that had adult onset diabetes, was overweight, had cholesterol and triglyceride levels I had never seen before. And, we sat down with the parents and with psychologists and said, this starts with you, the parents. I mean, you're the ones that are buying her the food, and so you have to look at it that way. You have to hold yourself accountable in both ways, being active and diet. And small changes go a long way, but you can't go out and buy, bags of chips. You can't go out and buy, eat pizza every night or whatever. I mean, you have to, it's not like you can't ever have that stuff again, but you have to hold yourself accountable and make sure you make some changes that are going to work.
my father had this saying that I just love and still use, which is moderation in all things, including moderation. He's
Right.
like, look,
Exactly.
what? Yeah, we don't eat ice cream, once in a blue moon. But you know
Right.
what? Every now and then you're going to sit down and knock off a pint of Ben and Jerry's, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But
I
you
mean,
can't do that. That's not a way of life.
right.
That's
Right.
the exception. And
And you can, if a person is being so careful for week after week, and then they do have a pint of Ben and Jerry's, okay, so that's okay. You go out the next day, and maybe you're even a little more careful with your diet the next day, and maybe you even walk a little bit farther or jog a little bit farther than you did the previous day. There's ways, and I think that word accountability is huge. There's a
yeah,
saying that I say, that I use all the time, and it's, make the changes that will change you. And that's what it's all about. Make those changes that you need so you can change yourself.
Do you see people that, have had years, a lifetime of dietary, basically poor nutritional habits, that how do they do making those changes? Because I think a lot of times it's just, I'm not sure it's necessarily that it's related to food just as much as change is hard for people.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, even good change is stressful,
Yeah.
you know?
And I mean, a lot, with, as the way society is, a lot of people, it's a social thing as well. I mean, you like to go out and have a great dinner with friends and maybe have some drinks and have some dessert. And it's just the way of life. So, you have some, like, for example, some executives that I've worked with over the years, they get to be about 50 years old and their doctor says, hey, you're going down the wrong path here. I mean, you're not going to last much longer if you continue this path. So that's when a lot of people contact me and we get them set on a program and moving in the right direction. But it's still difficult for them because they're, for 40 years, they've been eating the same way and not exercising. Yeah. So it's sometimes very small steps in the beginning. But like I said earlier, walk around the block once the first time. You get out there and just do that. It's something. It makes a difference.
It's interesting. We see a lot of folks, as you probably know, this, fatty liver stuff. As a gastroenterologist, probably the most common thing I would see as far as liver disease was fatty liver.
Yeah.
And pretty much all of that is really, related to sort of centripetal obesity and, high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah.
And you say to people, because they feel fine, they just have their blood test was abnormal and the ultrasound says, oh, you had a fatty liver. And I used to say to them, I'm like, you know what, this is like you're driving down the highway and the engine light just came on.
Yeah,
you're operating out of bounds, and you're lucky it showed up this way rather than as your fatal myocardial infarction when you go face down in your soup, in front of your family, or you have a stroke, or suddenly you turn around and you go, why am I injecting myself with insulin?
Yeah.
And
there's no doubt. Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes that check engine light is the motivation someone needs, to make those changes. And, I mean, there's so much you can go into. I mean, the whole, you have to start moving. Movement is so important. And a exercise program, maybe 3 days a week in the beginning, but try to work your way up to 5 days a week. But also, again, it's the diet portion, it's portion control, it's choice of foods, and I've been doing a lot lately with the keto diet, higher fat, low carb dieting, and with modifications, maybe not so strict full keto, but low carb dieting. And, that all those sugars and carbs, all they do is turn on a switch in your body and make your body store body fat. I mean, you can't burn body fat when you're consuming high fructose corn syrup and carbohydrates, so that's a big important thing. I've seen it going back to that girl, that 13-year-old girl that had all those health issues. The first week we put her on a keto based diet, so a ketogenic based diet, but with all healthy unsaturated fats in the diet. Same number of calories she was eating when we did her food diary 2 weeks prior. And when she started the diet and the parents bought her the correct foods and she stuck with it, she came back the next week, she had lost 16 pounds in that first week.
Wow.
And the next week she lost another 12 pounds. I mean, she felt satisfied. She felt like she was still eating. One of her friends had a birthday party and she still had a cupcake, You can't like eliminate everything, but she was focused and she was moving, we got her moving, and it works out. I mean, it can be done. It can be done easier than I think a lot of people believe.
Well, and that's the thing. From my perspective, the healthcare system's good at fixing broken things,
Right,
but
right,
it's not good at preventing things.
right.
The healthcare system makes no money with prevention. They do lip service for prevention, but we get paid when something's broken.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
and so that's why I like hearing what you have to say, which is, look, you know what, these things are preventable, and it's not that hard to do.
Yeah.
It's hard to make changes, and it's hard to make changes consistently. I mean, do you have strategies for people that come to you and say, you know what, I'm having a hard time with this? Like,
I think, everyone is so different. You have to kind of almost go through a checklist and see exactly what they're feeling, and mentally and physically. And then I build the program accordingly. I think, yeah, again, we go back to like what we were talking about earlier. The middle-aged male seems like they have the most difficult time changing their diet and wanting to exercise. But then, once they start to see some changes, everyone pretty much gets on board with it and goes. Yeah, I mean, I don't no specific strategies, except again making the changes that will change you, and being held accountable for what you're doing. That's one of the things with being a coach and a trainer and a nutritionist, is that some of these people that I see every week, I'm holding them accountable. I show up exactly at the right time when we made that appointment for. I ring that doorbell, and they probably are inside saying, "Oh boy, now he's gonna ask me what I ate yesterday and for the past couple of days." And that's being held accountable because they know I'm going to ask, and I'm going to say to them, now, what's a better choice? Like,
yeah.
let's talk about what is a better choice than eating that pizza with, extra cheese and 3 different types of meat on it. I mean, let's do something different. So that's, I try to talk to each individual as personably as possible to help them with their issues, whatever it might be.
Well, and I think maybe the other part of accountability, which is a great tool for anyone in anything, but accountability can also be that walk around the block. I'm going with my neighbor,
Right.
So they're expecting me to be out there tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
Right.
I mean, I think and that's the other part I like about it, is that it becomes more of a lifestyle, that you build it into your life, and then it's less daunting, or at least it works for me, where it's just like, well, we're going to go hang out, we're going to go ride around, we'll have some laughs, we'll beat on each other a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think,
because otherwise I might be here watching, I don't know, Enter the Dragon or something on Saturday afternoon instead of
right. Yeah, I mean,
right.
I think, if you have a friend that will hold each other accountable for especially their exercise part of it, if you can get out and walk with a friend or a significant other, I think that's perfect. But yeah, I mean, it still comes down to that accountability thing, and
you've got to do the work.
Yeah, you got to do work, whether, and that's why I said before, you have to decide, that the individual has to decide that, what, this is it. I don't like seeing myself in the mirror. I don't feel like I don't want to feel like I do right now. I don't want to struggle to get off the sofa because my back hurts, or, my knees hurt,
Yeah.
do something about it.
No,
So
and I see, I see lots of patients who they are miserable, and they're on medications for their diabetes, they're on medications for high blood pressure, they have reflux, they have asthma, they have fatty liver, they have, and they're not happy, and they're
right,
depressed,
right, yeah,
and they feel trapped. And it's like, I mean, those are the people that I really kind of, want to want to want to get to the most, because I think they're not going to walk into American Family Fitness or whatever and go sign me up.
sure,
But can you get them out and kind of go, what? Maybe it's not even all the way around the block on day one. Maybe it's just up to the end of the block and back.
exactly, yeah,
But do something,
right,
and have one less cookie today. We'll start there. It's like steering a super tanker. I think it's like,
right, right,
it's in a go-kart, man. We're not just going to throw the wheel and make a hard turn here. It's got to come around. It's a
right.
process,
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a big process. And I think, I think anyone can do it. And I'll bring this example up because I think examples are always great. I several years back worked with an 89-year-old woman who couldn't leave her apartment downtown Chicago anymore. Just overweight and knees and back and everything, didn't have the strength in her thighs to barely walk around the apartment. And it took about a year. But when she turned 90, about a year later, that was her goal in the beginning, was to be able to walk down Michigan Avenue again. And
when she's 90, this is great.
so 1 year later, it took about that long. She went out for the first time and walked without a cane down Michigan Avenue from the John Hancock all the way to the river and back. At 90, she made the changes that changed her. I mean, she did it. I mean, we did it together. I held her accountable. She held herself accountable, when I wasn't there, and we did the strength training. But she made those changes with her diet and lost a lot of weight and became mobile again.
So you're basically saying if an 89-year-old woman can do this, so can you, right?
That's right.
That's a great story.
I
That's a
mean,
great story. So we're just about out of time. If folks want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
oh, what's the best way to do that? They could send me an email for sure. So my email address would be bharris206 at comcast.net.
Yeah, and then you have a website, right, as well?
I do. So I have a website and a pretty big Instagram account, and that would be NEXT. So that's next level, LEVL fit, FIT. So NEXTLEVLFIT.com. And that is my Instagram handle as well. So they can follow some fitness pointers and all that kind of stuff there. But yeah, feel free to reach out. I do coaching and training all over the place, because just like this we're doing now on Zoom, you can do anything from anywhere nowadays.
It's true. It's true. Well, hey man, thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. It's great to catch up with you.
I hope it changes a few people's lives. I hope people become accountable for their health.
Well, exactly. You know what? And frankly, stay healthy and save yourself a lot of money later.
That's right.
Paying hospital and doctor bills.
That's right. Stay out of that healthcare system. That's been my goal with everyone.
All right, man. Well, that's another Consults Over Coffee. I'm Dr. Michael Jones. This is Brian Harris, and I'll be back next week. Thanks for checking this out.